Hey everybody, welcome to Beaming Notes, and today we're going to look at the summary of the poem
A Psalm of Life, a poem by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. About the poet. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow was not just an influential figure in the literary and cultural circuit of 19th century America, but he was also America's most loved poet who penned some memorable works such as Paul Revere's Ride, Hiawatha, Evangeline, and many more. He was also the first one to translate Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy. Through his poetic career, Longfellow achieved fame and admiration on a national as well as global parlance, despite being hit repeatedly by personal tragedies such as the untimely deaths of his two wives. He is one of the few American writers who have been honored in the Poets' Corner of Westminster Abbey. He made significant contributions to the American literary tradition by manifesting how American poetry could be linked to European traditions and thought. He is widely remembered now as a poet, traveler, linguist, and a romantic who identified with European traditions while staying true to his American roots. About the poem. A Psalm of Life by H.W. Longfellow was published in his first collection of poetry, namely Voices in the Night, in 1839. A psalm is one of those poems that have gone on to become mainstays of national culture, admired by generations of readers long after they have studied it in school. As the name suggests, the poem is a spiritual utterance on the meaning of life to be read and be influenced by. To this date, the poem remains one of Longfellow's most read and loved short lyrics. Setting of the poem. A Psalm of Life by Henry W. Longfellow is a beautiful poem with a very spiritual setting. In this poem, the poet directly addresses the soul as opposed to the minds of the reader in order to inspire them to achieve something substantial in life. The mood of the poem is somber and didactic. However, at no point does the poem fall into the danger of sounding preachy, since the poet imparts his pearls of wisdom through the poem using a wonderful style in the most heartfelt way. Summary. Stanza 1. Tell me not in mournful numbers, life is but an empty dream, for the soul is dead that slumbers, and things are not what they seem. The poet says that he does not want to pay any heed to those verses of the Bible which stress upon the futility of life because it comes to an end eventually. He discards any pessimistic way of thinking which regards life as a dream that is empty. In dreams, we are offered a lot of great things, but dreams are empty because the moment we wake up, all that we had been awarded vanishes. The poet says that it is indeed true that human life resembles such empty dreams because of life's transience. We get to enjoy all that life offers us only to give it all up when it is time to leave Earth. However, things are not what they seem. In spite of its temporality, life is much more substantial than dreams, since a lot can be achieved during one lifetime as opposed to in dreams. Anyone who chooses to think otherwise and gives upon life because it ends eventually has a very weak soul. He disavows such a weakness of spirit and the pessimism born out of it. Stanza 2. Life is real, life is earnest, and the grave is not its goal. Dust thou art, to dust returnest, was not spoken of the soul. The poet says that in spite of being temporal, life is very real. Just because it comes to an end, it should not be taken lightly. Life is serious business, and because it is short, it calls out to us with an urgency to achieve all that we can and develop ourselves. Life is real, life is earnest. To help us view life in a serious and urgent light, the poet urges us to see it as independent of impending death. The aim of being alive is not to die one day. As humans who have been given the gift of life, we must not think of it as a slow wait for death. Instead, we must utilize all the opportunities that come our way to better ourselves. The poet adds that the biblical wisdom that we all come from nothing and vanish into nothingness is indeed true. However, this wisdom is not applicable for the soul, which is immortal and lives on till eternity. Here, the idea from the first stanza that life is not an empty dream is being reiterated. Life is not akin to a dream because of the soul. Our soul adds meaning and permanence to our life. Death cannot touch it. Stanza 3. Not enjoyment and not sorrow is our destined end or way, but to act that each tomorrow find us rather than today. In the third stanza, the poet talks to us about the best way to make the most of our lives. He says that whiling away our time in merriment or by grieving over losses or pain is not the right way to be living our numbered days. He says that as a most evolved species, humans are destined for much more than just mindless pleasure or sorrow. The poet then invokes the theme of carpe diem, or the proverbial seize the day, and asks to act. He wants us to make ourselves useful and fill our days with activity to the brim, such that every coming day sees us more advanced in life than what we are at present. He wants us to keep striving to develop ourselves and our souls. That way, when the time to bid farewell does come, we would have reached the pinnacle of self-completion. Stanza 4. Art is long, time is fleeting, and our hearts, though stout and brave, still like muffled drums are beating funeral marches to the grave. In the fourth stanza, the poet explains the urgent need to make every day count. He says that art, which is the only nourishment for the soul, is endless and our time on earth is too limited. Hence, he asks us not to lose any time and cultivate our soul through art, because even though our heart might seem strong when we are young, it is actually like a drum, the beats of which keep dropping as it slips towards the inevitable end. What the poet means to say is that our days on earth are numbered and every day takes us closer to the end. Our strong heartbeats die a little every day, like muffled drums, since they are on a funeral march to the grave. Hence, we must soak in as much of the infinite repertoire of art as possible before death takes us in our stride. Stanza 5. In the world's broad field of battle, in the bivouac of life, be not like dumb-driven cattle, be a hero in strife. The fifth stanza is like Longfellow's call to action for all his young readers. He compares the world to a battlefield and our life as a camp on that field. What the poet means is that he understands that the world is destined to throw obstacles towards our way, and camped on this battlefield of world, our average lives are no less than a war against all the hardships and struggles. However, the poet wants us to not let the struggle get to us. He encourages us not to follow the masses in their blind run. The poet wants us to rise above the mediocrity of being dumb-driven cattle and face all the hardships of life like a hero. Stanza 6. Trust no future, however pleasant. Let the dead past bury its dead. Act lost in the living present, heart within and God overhead. In the sixth stanza, the poet asks us to live in the present. He asks us not to waste our time planning the pleasures of the future because one can never trust the future to come. According to him, the one stuck in the past should also move on because what is over is done with and there is no point mulling over it. Hence, he wants us to bury our past, that is, leave it behind. The poet opines that neither the future nor the past holds any key to any productivity, since the same lies in the present. He wants us to act only on the present and fill it with all our energy. He asks us to invest our present with all our heart and have faith in God that we will be awarded for all our efforts that we have put in the right direction. Stanza 7. Lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and departing, leaving behind us footprints on the sands of time. In this stanza, poet tells us that lives of great men remind us that we can make our own lives noble and elevated. That is, we can reach great heights. Finally, when we die, we can leave behind us our footprints, that is, our noble deeds for others to follow our path. Stanza 8. Footprints that perhaps another, sailing over life's solemn main, a forlorn and shipwrecked brother, seeing shall take heart again. In this stanza, the poet stresses upon the fact that our great actions are capable of initiating another chain of greatness. Just like we take inspiration from the great men in the history, our success stories can also inspire someone going through a tough time in his life. He compares life to rough seas and parallels the act of living as sailing on such solemn waters. The forlorn and shipwrecked brother then becomes any helpless human being going through hardships and troubles in his life. He says that our great actions can inspire a fellow lonely and devastated sailor on the sea of life to take inspiration from our actions and have the courage to brave the rough times of his life. Hence, by seizing the day and making it count in spite of obstacles, we will not just help ourselves, but will also be doing humanity a great favor by extending a tradition of bravery and greatness. Stanza 9. Let us, then, be up and doing, with a heart for any fate, still achieving, still pursuing, learn to labor and to wait. In the concluding stanza, the poet yet again inspires us to be ready to fill our present with a burst of activity and have courage to face any tumbling blocks that might come our way in the process. Activity and the courage to face any hardships are the crux of a meaningful life, according to Longfellow. The poet adds that in our pursuit to achieve our goals, we must learn to embrace hard work along with patience. Just working hard is not enough. We all need to exercise patience while the fruits of our labor materialize. Form and structure. Rhyme scheme. The poem A Psalm of Life by H. W. Longfellow consists of 9 stanzas with 4 lines each. End rhyme has been used extensively in the poem all throughout. It follows a rhyme pattern of AB, AB, CD, CD, EF, EF, GH, GH, IJ, IJ, KL, KL, MN, MN, OP, OP, QR, QR. Central idea. The poem A Psalm of Life by H. W. Longfellow is a call to action made by the poet, urging the youth to make the most of the present, irrespective the looming threat of death and the myriad hardships that life might throw upon our paths. Hence, the central idea of the poem is to utilize the present to the fullest and to enrich it with as much hard work as possible without carrying any baggage from our past or being fascinated by plans of the future. The poet asks us to take inspiration from our great forefathers who have made their mark in history and urges us to do the same for our future generations. The poet also stresses upon the virtue of patience and courage as it will be our guiding light while we try to work our way through the struggles, which beautifying our present will entail. According to the poem, although our days on earth are numbered, we must not be bothered by the fact that we will lose it all in the end, because our soul, which will seek development for all our efforts, will live on and add meaning to our short time on earth. Conclusion. A Psalm of Life is a highly inspirational piece which imparts a very important life lesson, that of seizing the day with hard work, courage, and patience. The tone of the poem is didactic and encouraging, whereas the style is very ornate. The poet has used poetic devices extensively all throughout the poem, which has increased the poeticality of the poem on the whole. The message that the poem diffuses into readers is highly spiritual and is relevant to readers of all times, making this poem as significant now as it was when it had been published in 1839.